Violence and extremism are not unique to any one faith. We have to resolve that in our determination to protect ourselves, that we do not stigmatize or demonize entire communities because of the actions of a few. And this is a serious issue that is threatening our brothers and sisters in a particular community. We recognize that no community can be expected to meet a challenge as complex as this one alone, which is why we're all gathered here today.
We protect our youth. University students is definitely not the problem. So, and I know law enforcement is not looking there. If they are, well, let's just save taxpayers a lot of money and stop doing that, right? And we know it's not the mosques. And we know it's not the leadership. We're going to find out together what is really going on. Our next speaker is proof that we as a community have never had a problem with anyone. We have no permanent enemies and no permanent friends, as the National Black Caucus has. We have permanent interests. A few years ago, the community built a unique and unprecedented partnership with the US consulate. And people thought, how? Aren't you Muslims against Americans? I have cousins that are in the States, in Chicago. There are Muslim Americans. And so the narrative became like a Tom and Jerry. You remember Tom and Jerry? You know, Tom hates Jerry, Jerry hates Tom, or so it would appear. One is bad, one is good. But our narrative is a little richer than that. Our story is a little deeper than that. So the US consulate and the Muslim community engaged in this partnership. And that led to such an amazing level of practice, another model partnership. I had the honor of visiting the Pentagon. And I felt more comfortable making wudu, and those of you that are joining our tour after this, I'll show you what that is. I had the more comfortable making wudu in the Pentagon than I did in Market Mall. And after I came back from the States, visiting 5 different states, we went to Michigan, of course, we went to California, we were there in Texas, and of course, Utah. And when I came back with something. I came back with a renewed sense of human rights. The Americans know how to fight for their rights. And they make no apology for it. And so when I came back, I was able to start the Calgary Muslim Youth for Human Rights. And this group of youth, who are authentic actors today, had the opportunity to dialogue with the US Ambassador, David Jacobson, alone. Where we had in 2011, I believe it was, a meeting like this one. But we hadn't arrived yet. We didn't really know what we wanted to do with the partnerships. Now we do. Now we know exactly what it is we want to do. We need to build these relationships. Our next speaker, who I met very briefly at his residence here in Calgary, and he's such a down-to-earth kind of guy. He's been all over the world. Since 1998, he's been a diplomat, promoting governance and the rule of law. I went back and forth. Now I gotta get. Sorry, my bad. Oops. Peter Kujawinski is the US Consul here in Calgary. A man that we had the opportunity of also meeting again to renew that partnership. Here's a man who not only takes time to spend with his family, but also to write books, children's books as well. Books that people can be inspired by. Now, of course, Peter, if I say anything good about America, they're going to say, oh, you just probably fell into that Burger King coffee now, right? And somebody actually said that recently, and we got really mad. Really, really mad. But Peter is somebody who has welcomed and opened a true, authentic partnership with the Muslim community to take whatever it is we're doing here and see how can it bridge internationally. Internationally. Imagine a made in Calgary strategy that's taken all over the world to prevent criminal radicalization. Please welcome with me U.S. Consul Peter Kujawinski.
Thank you all very much. And as an aside, I think if you all really want a great start to your day, I would recommend that Mahdi introduce you. So, just kind of wake up in the morning, have Mahdi kind of record something beforehand, and just press play, and you're like, oh man, that is a good introduction. Thank you. I am honored to be here today to represent the U.S. as we speak about this extremely important and topical issue. And I would like to thank the imam, the elders, the young volunteers, and all the guests for having me here today. And I agree with our previous speakers. What better place to talk about this issue than Calgary? Ever since I arrived here 2 years ago, I have just felt so incredibly welcomed. My family has felt incredibly welcomed. Not only have we been welcomed with open arms, but we decided to really double down on that welcome, and now we have a third child. Thank you, Calgary, and thank you, Alberta Healthcare. And it's been a wonderful experience for us. And unfortunately, I only have one more year left, and I tell you, they're going to have to drag me kicking and screaming out of this place. Calgary, I think, is so welcoming because it's one of the youngest cities of Canada. You can feel this vibrancy, you can feel the excitement. But it is true that there are some youth that do not feel this. They don't feel the same sense of belonging and acceptance that I did when I arrived here 2 years ago. And I think it's our responsibility as teachers and role models for these young people to ensure that they live in a world of acceptance, of belonging, and of inclusion. And I think that we need to work with all of the stakeholders out there, everyone here, communities, law enforcement, educators, youth organizations, to ensure that today's young people feel a sense of a great deal of empowerment and purpose. And to me, one of the key ways to do this is to really continually underscore the basic values of our society. And I say our society because I think the US and Canada are very much the same type of society. We value community, we value multiculturalism, and we value inclusion. We can see examples here of community when we think about last year's floods and this year's branches all over the place, and how strangers lent their hands and arms and their entire being to others in a time of need. And you can see multiculturalism when you walk down Stephen Avenue at the lunch hour. 25% of Calgary's population is foreign-born, and they speak over 120 different languages. Or you can also see multiculturalism during the many festivals here in the summertime that celebrate all of the different cultures here in Calgary. And of course, I saw inclusion just very recently. I see it all the time, but I see inclusion very recently, 2 weeks ago, at Calgary's largest ever Gay Pride Festival. And I look around this room, and I see people of different backgrounds, of different races, and of different religions who are all joined together to address a serious issue. And this is a serious issue that is threatening our brothers and sisters in a particular community that, if not addressed, will likely lead to an even greater conflict or effect. We recognize that no community can be expected to meet a challenge as complex as this one alone, which is why we're all gathered here today. Violence and extremism are not unique to any one faith or country or city or province or state, and the responsibility to oppose ignorance and violence rests with us all. We have to resolve that in our determination to protect ourselves, that we do not stigmatize or demonize entire communities because of the actions of a few. In the United States, we're addressing this issue in several ways. First, we're constantly working to improve our understanding of the process of criminal radicalization, because the more that we understand it, the more we can do to stop it. And I have to give a special thank you to Chief Hansen for his leadership role in this, not only here in Calgary, but throughout Canada and throughout the United States. Thank you, Chief Hansen. We're working with Congress, with academic and research institutions, as well as with governments, to gain a more precise understanding of this challenge and how do we address it. And I have to tell you, very, very honestly, a crucial key partner for us is Canada. Because in all ways, Canadian society is quite similar to American society. We're built by immigrants, and we derive much of our vitality and growth from the efforts and values of people who consciously made that incredible decision to immigrate and build their lives here. And second, equipped with this better understanding of what exactly causes criminal radicalization, we're increasing support, the support that we offer to communities as they build their own local initiatives. We're working to empower local communities with the information and tools that they need to build their own capacity to disrupt, to challenge, and to counter propaganda in both the real world and the virtual world. This requires not only investment by the federal government, but also by our state and local governments. And we're expanding our coordination not only internally within the United States, but externally with not only the Canadian federal government, but with provinces and with local communities here to ensure that we understand better the problem and that we can share best practices. And then finally, and this is an absolutely critical element to this, we have to work to improve, and we are working to improve how we communicate, how we, as the federal government, communicate with the American people about the threat of violent extremism. And we have to communicate exactly what we're doing to address it, because we cannot meet this challenge if we do not see it for what it is and what it is not. And very importantly, this includes dispelling the myths that have developed over the years that include misperceptions about fellow Americans who are Muslim. I know this is the end of the first section, so I'm not going to stay here for much longer, but I do want to end with a few words about the significance of this day and to recall the horror of what happened on September 11th, 13 years ago. I was in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. It was my first time in Haiti, and it was my first year there. It was a beautiful day, and I had just gotten married 2 months ago, and my wife was actually working there in Haiti, and I still remember it that day. It was just such a beautiful day, and then of course you hear the horror of what happened back in New York, and I suspect that many of you have the same exact crystalline vision of what happened that day, but also where you were and what you did afterwards. And so for me, 9/11 symbolizes many, many things, but in a very personal way, it reminds me that life can change, and it can even end in an instant. And so every extra day that we have on this earth is a gift, and how we use those extra days and extra years allotted to us reflects not only who we are as people, who we are as individuals, but who we are as a community. And in the United States and Canada, the values of community, of multiculturalism and inclusion are our core values. And how we promote these values in the extra days and extra years allotted to us will determine the vibrancy and success not only of our own lives, but the lives of the communities in which we live. And so in that vein, I do want to thank Mahdi, and I do want to thank the organizers for using their extra time and their extra years to discuss this absolutely critical issue. And I thank all of you for taking your time to participate in this. Thanks very much.
Our next speaker is leading the greatest university in the world. Dr. Elizabeth Cannon, who leads the university that these fine folks go to. It wasn't long until we knew where Dr. Cannon would take our university. It It wasn't long after she became the president that she came out with the Eyes High initiative, one that truly brought community, academics, researchers, and students together towards a common goal: to make the University of Calgary one of the top 5 research universities, grounded in innovative learning and teaching, and fully integrated with the community of Calgary. That's their words. I could not say them any better. Fully integrated with the community of Calgary. By the time the University of Calgary becomes 50 years old, it will be amongst the 5 top research universities. Her vision is one that I have personally adopted, and eyes high and nothing less. We're looking to a greater future. Once she was the Dean of the Faculty of Engineering, Schulich School of Engineering, one that most Muslims know, am I right? She has countless awards and achievements, including the top 40 under 40, and one of the 100 most powerful Canadian women, a mother of 2. Please welcome me in introducing one of the most powerful women in the city of Calgary, Dr. Elizabeth Cannon.
Mahdi, thank you so much for allowing me to be here, and Dina for the invitation. It's a real privilege on behalf of the University of Calgary to be in this room, to be part of this dialogue, and to talk about something that's truly important to not only to our world, our community, and to our institution. What makes me also very proud is to see what our university can do in terms of student leadership, to see the quality of students that we have at our institution, not only in their academic work, but in their community building, and that's truly what a university is all about. So I'm just delighted to be here this morning. This is a very important time. You heard from Chief Hansen and Teresa Woo-Pow about some of the aspects that are really on our thoughts and minds, and the university is not immune. We are community builders, we are part of global society, and we have a particular responsibility as one who educates and helps form and impact young people at particularly important parts of their lives when they're developing who they are, what they want to be, their thoughts, who they interact with. And it's our responsibility as an institution to ensure that that is positive and constructive. Mahdi talked about the Eyes High vision, and often when I'm giving speeches, I talk about being top 5 in research, although Mahdi says we're already number 1 in the world, so I'm not sure what we're going to do now. But it's about the research impact. It's about the quality of our programs. It's about building our reputation. And yes, that's important. But actually where I spend a lot of my time is helping build the culture of the University of Calgary. Because we know if we don't create a sense of respect, a sense of trust, building that healthy organization, if we don't enable our faculty, staff, and students to be able to develop their individual and collective potentials, we will never achieve all of our goals. That's where we spend our time. That will be the differentiator for the University of Calgary relative to any other institution in this country, and I would say around the world. So how do we do that? Part of it is staying true to what a university is. It is a place for creative debate, one that people can express their ideas, which often differ. It is one where you want to challenge the status quo, you want people to disagree respectfully, and you want to ensure the issues of the day are on the table, being discussed, being thought about, and hopefully some solutions. We want to do this in a constructive way. We want to do this in a way that is safe for all members of our community, regardless of gender, ethnic background, sexual orientation, spiritual affiliation, physical ability, or socioeconomic status. That's important to us. It's in the DNA of what a university is all about.
But what else are we doing? One of the initiatives we launched last year is called Respect in the Workplace. This is working with Sheldon Kennedy and the Respect Group to ensure that we're building a campus that values diversity, that understands what respect is, that we don't tolerate bullying and harassment, and we see individuals for who they are. This is a unique program. There's no other university in this country doing something on this level. About a third of our faculty and staff have already completed the program voluntarily, and we expect more to do so this year. It's talking about the very basics of what respect means. How do I treat other people? How do I expect to be treated? These are not easy conversations, and especially in the academic environment. But it's important because if we're going to build that healthy organization, people have to understand other points of view. We have a very diverse community, both in our students, our faculty, and our staff. And what may be okay to one person may not be acceptable to others. We need to have the courage to have those conversations and ensure that we're building that culture. We recently opened the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Protected Disclosure. Now that's a long title, but it's really providing a hub and a point of contact to integrate diversity and inclusion initiatives across our campus and to help foster a community of change makers by developing cultural awareness and competencies to enable us to harness the potential of the best minds on our campus and certainly help them do so at impacts around the world. Again, it's an important signal to our community of what our values are, what we hold dear, and what we will not tolerate. We understand that the students coming into our university come from many different backgrounds across our city and across our country and around the world. Often these students may be the first in their family getting a post-secondary education, and they may be coming to us with issues that they may be struggling with within their family, their own mental health, perhaps a lack of confidence coming to the University of Calgary. We've seen some particular events play out over the last several months that involve the University of Calgary that absolutely shook us to our core, and I'm referring to the Brentwood tragedy. These are incidents that make you think and certainly make you realize that although we have a responsibility to ensure that our students develop intellectually, you want them to cross the stage with their credential in whatever program of study they aspire to do. But we have failed as an institution if we have not put as much emphasis on the personal well-being, the personal development of our students, because that is what's going to allow them to change and grow. We take this seriously. We want to ensure our students feel valued at the university. And you may have seen last week we launched a new program. This would not have been possible without a family of community leaders coming forward and saying to us, how can we build a more resilient, a more supported student body at the University of Calgary? What can we do that is unique, that our students feel part of a community, they don't feel isolated, and they feel valued and respected? We launched U Calgary Strong with the support of $5 million from the community. That program is unique in this country because it integrates personal wellness, leadership training, and community engagement. 3 key components. All of our incoming students are being invited to take what's called Strengths Quest. They do a survey where it tells them their top 5 strengths. It's not about telling what's wrong with them. It's telling them what are they bringing as new students to us. Every student brings value to the University of Calgary. A student needs to feel that. They need to know that they come to our institution with something to give. They will receive, but they have something to give and to offer. Students are signing up for that. They're getting a sense that, wow, I didn't know I was good at this or good at that. We have people trained to do one-on-one sessions. And it's about helping some of our students overcome that sense of being overwhelmed about putting a foot on a campus that has 32,000 students. A second component of UCalgary Strong is a bystander intervention program. I think too often, as members of the community, you may see something, you say, don't want to get involved, don't know what to do, I'm just going to turn the other way. We need to train our community, our faculty, our staff, and students to look at these issues head on. You may not be the experts in content, but you can be a connector between somebody in need and the support that we offer, and we have a lot of support on our campus. The third component of this program is really to build student leadership and engagement opportunities. Every student should feel part of a community at the University of Calgary. It may be a club, it may be a team, it may be a volunteer initiative on campus or something off campus. How can we ensure that every student does not feel isolated, that they feel that they're part of something bigger than themselves? They have a reason to be at the university beyond going to their classes and doing their academic work. We put a lot of emphasis and work closely with our student leaders to ensure that the programming that is there, the support systems that are there, are really allowing our students to build who they are now and into the future. That is our responsibility as the University of Calgary. So in summary, we want to be part of the conversation. I think we are trying to do the right things, but we have lots to learn. It is a challenging time for all of us trying to better understand this very complex world and translate that into actions and programs that reach out particularly to those in need. We work closely with community associations. We work closely with Calgary Police. We work closely with government. We are at the table. We want to be part of the conversation, and having us here today is a huge privilege for us and an honor to be able to keep that conversation going. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Cannon. Except that you said you wanted to be at the table. We're already at the table. We're here together. And the University of Calgary, I believe, is going to be the institute that breaks through. It's an institute that has already said, we own it. We own these issues. We're very unique in the way things are done. You know, often, unfortunately, mistakes have been made. Some people have said, oh, the U of C students are the ones getting radicalized. Some are saying, oh, the mosque is the problem. Others are saying, no, it's the Muslim leaders that are the problem. It's the Muslim community that's the problem. And anyone who knows anything about science knows that that is not science. In fact, it's the opposite. It's anti-science. I think, if that's even a word. Is that a word, engineers? In psychology, in social work, we can call it a word. Co-construct the new word. But anyways, the idea here is this. Those are actually the protective factors to criminal radicalization. Universities, free speech, people asking the difficult questions. And university students are in a process of training so that they can come out into the world and work to solve some of society's most difficult problems. But what happens when we limit that? What happens when we say, you as a Muslim cannot speak out against political issues, or else a big bad reporter will talk about you in the media? We have a very good friend of ours, Saima Jamal, who unfortunately, after all of her hard work and dedication and passion, and somebody who shows the real meaning of advocacy and empowerment, and all of a sudden, somebody says something negative about her, and now she's all alone.
And how can a little community organization that our institution used to be proud to say we don't fund them? How can these communities develop the capacity to sit as equals with institutions that have been around in our society for 100 years, serving the same population most of their time? So I'm very pleased that, to see that all of you are here today from different sectors of society, different segments of our society, to actually have this conversation. And I'm sure that it's going to be an engaging, important conversation. And so I'm very pleased to, and to recognize and applaud your leadership, your commitment to forge a preventative, collaborative path to address a growing concern in our community, as well as the larger global community, to examine and explore preventative strategies through empowering our young people and enhancing our ability to work collectively and collaboratively to address common concerns and issues. I appreciate this opportunity to share a few words, authentic words, with you this morning. And I look forward to learning about the outcome of this conference and the deliberation of this room with all these very committed people. I wish all of you success ahead, and I thank you for the opportunity.
Take care of your spirit, have a coffee, enjoy each other, chat, talk. We'll be back in 5 minutes. Thank you.
Can I get one of the police officers to fire your gun, please? Just one shot in the air. There you go. It's been symbolic. The symbolic shot has been fired. We're very, very sorry. We understand that you have a job to do as well, and we don't want to make it more difficult for you, but we want to get you guys lunch as soon as possible. Oh, so nobody wants lunch?
Our next speaker is perhaps the voice of the silent. Following the death of her son, Damian Clairmont, she decided enough was enough and that something needed to be done. She now heads the Hayat program, and there's more on that program in your packages. She hopes to provide immediate support to those who need it. She went through a difficult time where there was no support. Empty promises, false claims, so much, and everybody around her perhaps didn't understand. And how could people possibly understand the pain? My question to our next speaker is, how do you do it? What is it about your struggle that keeps you here today? I met Christianne Boudreau a few weeks ago over coffee, and we had a great conversation. Not only did our vision and mission match, but another bond was formed that day. The bond of family. Chris, on behalf of the Muslim community, welcome. You are our family. We are here to support you. She believes in the cause, and we believe in her. Please welcome Chris Boudreau.
Well, I don't know where to start after that. Especially after watching all these professional speakers and all their notes and pieces of paper, and I come with none. All I come is with my heart.
That's it. That's all you need.
I've never spoken to a crowd this big in my life. My knees are shaking, so please forgive me. I'm a mother, not a professional speaker. This has been one of the most difficult challenges of my life. And I can't even begin to explain all the questions that still run through my head every single day. When I learned where Damian was, and not where he told us he was going to be, it was a shock in of itself. The son I knew was compassionate, caring, loved people, cared about people, especially the underdog. He would stand up for kids that were being bullied at school. I'd get called into principal's office countless times. But that's who he was. So trying to make sense of this all was extremely difficult. And in the beginning, I lived basically in this deep black hole. Who do I turn to? Where do I reach out? How do I get help from somebody when nobody understands any of this and there's nobody like me around? How do I get the support from my family to get through whatever we're about ready, this roller coaster ride that we're going to go through? And I didn't have any of those answers. I started searching and searching on the internet, anything for help, even just the words, the right words to say to my son to try to convince him to come home. I couldn't find anything. And I reached out to somebody, Mohammed Robert Heft in Ontario. I'd seen him in an interview out of desperation, sent an email, and he called me 10 minutes later, and it was 1:30 in the morning, his time. But he still phoned me and reached out. And that was the beginning when I realized there are people, there are other people out there who can help. You just have to find them. As everything went through some media contacts I had and starting to open up bit by bit by bit, because I was thinking if anybody else is going through this, they're feeling as alone as I am right now. And scared, and the stigma, and what do you do? So slowly and carefully, I started speaking out. I was terrified. Yes, my face was blacked out. I didn't want my name published. But I was scared. I didn't, this is something totally new. And over time, some of my media contacts gave me a contact name and number for a program called Hayat in Germany. Germany is a long ways away. So I started by contacting and communicating with him by email, and he explained how they worked with the family. They support the family to connect, and that's what it's all about, connection. It's got to come from here. We have to turn off our TVs and everything else. That connection is so important. So once I started learning more about how that all worked, we went back and forth on emails. And he finally got back to me saying, this is how we're going to strategize to start working what's best for your son and your family. I got the email 2 days after I learned of Damian's death. From there, I made a promise that I wouldn't let my son die in vain, that he had a heart of gold and something good would have to come out of this. So I traveled to Hayat and met with the organization. It's a superb organization, and great that you've got this here, Mahdi, and thank you so much, because this is giving me so much hope that everything is actually going to come together and save some lives and some families. Because the first thing they said when I was in the Hayat office was, it's about community. It's about teamwork. It's about connecting, creating credible relationships, trusting relationships, and working together and networking with all resources, not just one, not just another. It takes a full community. And that I had a lot of hope after that, because they told me of all their success stories, of how they help these youth come back or not even go and reintegrate them. But that community was the most important part of that. So I'm hopeful that today this is the beginning of something fantastic, wonderful for everybody to be a part of. And hopefully everybody will come together. This is something we need to do. It transfers across not just Islamic extremism, but it does transfer to gangs. It's the same mentality. It transfers to neo-Nazism, same mentality, right across the board. And I think if we start connecting again, start working with our families, supporting those families, don't let them go through what I went through. Be there, don't judge. We don't know, each person, each youth has something different inside them that makes them reach out that way to connect. We don't know what that is. Don't judge. Just reach out for that person next to you that needs the help. Listen. And anybody wanting to work with me, please, because it's going to take a lot of effort to bring the team out here for training. And that connection with everybody is going to mean so, so much. And even if it saves just one youth, it's a start. It's a beginning. Let's start being proactive instead of waiting, pressing charges, and being reactive later after the fact. And let's take care of the families that are experiencing this, because it is overwhelming and the questions never stop. And the biggest question I still ask today is, why did you leave us? And did you love us anymore? Don't let another mother go through that. Thanks.
Chris, thank you so much for being so brave. Again, how can anybody possibly understand the trauma and the hardship and the calamity of losing a child? And here we are, safe in Calgary, safe in Canada from these threats. But what we're not safe from is losing our youth. We're not safe from that. That's the problem that we're here to address. We have so many people in this room coming together to deal with one specific issue, and that's youth empowerment. Now, again, I want to reiterate, sometimes people see different organizations doing different things, thinking that we're competing for resources. We're not. We're community. We're competing to see who can do more, do better with the limited that we have. So please take a look at your portfolio. Hayat is clearly described, what goes into it. And Chris Boudreau's contact information is there. If you can support it, support it. But it will be part of our long-term strategy. It will be part of our family of organizations that deals with this issue. I promise you that. Now again, we have another guest with us, Dr. Swan, who brings greetings from the opposition. That's what it's called, the opposition. We don't look at government as a for or against. We don't look at government as a in power or not in power. We look at government as our employees, the community's employees. They have a job to do. Whether they're liberal or conservative or NDP makes no difference when it comes to youth empowerment. Again, no permanent enemies, no permanent friends, only permanent interests. And I thank the African American caucus in the US for giving us that statement. Our next speaker is a man who I met not too long ago, but since I've met him, he's become so close to me. Here's a man who is so passionate about the thing that he does. In such a short period of time, I find out everything, something new about him every other day. He's the director, one of the directors of Institute of Muslim Youth Development. Without him, this conference could not have taken place. He's in the back, you've already seen him. I'm not done yet. I mean, you can make your way up, but I'm not done yet. Now, the other thing is, he is one of those true role models for our youth. He volunteers his time, he gives effort, he loves his family, he's with his family. Get this, him and his dad are friends. Imagine that, he's friends with his father. I'd like to acknowledge his dad right here. Mr. Siddique, please just wave to the crowd. Your son is a great guy. We really appreciate you lending him to us for these last, I'm not going to tell you how long we've been planning. Here's a man who not only is an expert in martial arts, but also verbal jiu-jitsu. He is becoming a lawyer also at the University of Calgary. Please welcome the next top 30 under 30, Mr. Rahmatullah Siddique.
Well, that was quite the introduction, so I'll just set myself up here. So I'm just going to put my iPhone 6 down Anybody follow the? Okay, bad joke. I'm sorry. So I tried. Okay. Getting started here. So thank you, Mahdi. So my name is Rahmatullah Siddique. Lots of people call me Raham. It's easier for some people to pronounce. But I work with the Institute of Muslim Youth Development. I'm also a working professional in the community and, of course, a student for life. It's a long life, but I love it. Okay. So originally, I got involved with the Institute, which we refer to as IMYD, because I love helping youth. I remember growing up in Calgary as a young youth. We didn't have as many resources as we have now. And looking back on that, I love to give back, not only through martial arts, but through different programs. If they need help with school, if they need help with anything like that, I love to help them out. I've seen the community develop over the years, and is this, are we good?
You've got a theater voice. Go.
Okay, I've seen the community develop over the years, and it brings me so much joy. The reason I got involved with this conference is, like I said, we met not too long ago, and I have direct interaction with the youth. So I believe, through this partnership that we now have, we could really give back to the community. Just a little brief introduction about the Institute of Muslim Youth Development. We tell our youth leaders, which we have new ones every year. We also have repeats that come back every year. There's some actually volunteering today, so I'd like to give a shout out to all of them. We tell our youth leaders to lead by example. We want the children and the youth who come to our programs to be able to talk to these leaders. Talk to them like they're their friends, like they're their mentors. We want to give them opening to, if they have any problem, whether it be bullying at school or the topic of drugs, which a lot of teenagers have, they can come to these mentors and talk to them. We also provide them with a positive environment. So we run programs like summer camps, day camps, homework help, diploma prep. We run weekly youth nights where we just invite the youth to come out. We have a quick talk to get them motivated. Sometimes we give them pizza because they all love pizza. And then we just let them play basketball. We let them play soccer. We just let them be youth. We let them be kids. And, we have these leaders that run these nights, and they supervise, and they keep everything running on an ongoing basis. The benefit of this conference was, like we said, we wanted to build bridges. So if we look at this from a cost-benefit analysis point of view, our youth are an investment in the future. And we want to generate the greatest return on that investment. So through aligning with all of us in this room, through all of us aligning, we can progress, we can move forward, and we can get the greatest return on that investment. I want you guys to think of a car. A car has 4 wheels. If all 4 of those wheels trying to go in different directions, that car is not going to get anywhere. So we need to make everything go in the same direction. The car is the issue that we have at hand here. And through alignment of all of us in this room, we can get moving forward. We can move the community forward and progress the nation that we call Canada and this wonderful nation that we call Canada. I'm not going to keep you guys too long because I'm sure you, like myself, I'm very hungry. So we have an awesome lineup of food for you guys. But I'd like to thank you very much. If you have any more questions or anything, you can find me afterwards. And thank you all for coming out today.
Rahmatullah, thank you so much. Anybody realize we're behind schedule? It's okay. Does a true, authentic Palestinian shawarma with falafel and salad and hummus, does that make up for the extra 30 minutes that we're running off time? Yeah? Show of hands. Good. Everybody expecting to eat. Please, media, I know you got deadlines, but can you grab a sandwich before you go? At least so that at least we'll know you'll report good. For lack of right. Well, thank you so much, Rahmatullah, for talking about alignment, because that's what this is all about. Aligning the right players to reach a specific outcome. And Dalia had clearly let us know what these processes might look like. Chris has shown us that there's some unique and innovative ways to do things by looking abroad. Others say, well, why don't we look here? We have in this room just experts. We have Michael. Where's Michael? Terrorist expert from University of Calgary. Is he around? Oh, he had to go teach, darn. Okay. Now I can't just continue on my flow. It just interrupted it. We'll get back to that later. I'd also like to thank Chief Superintendent George Stephenson from the RCMP. Thank you so much for coming out. This is a partnership that's forming, a partnership that's going to go places. This is another piece of the puzzle, or I'd rather use Rahmatullah's analogy, it's another wheel that needs to carry this heavy, heavy machine. But it is one that is evidence-based. There is a logic model, as I look at public safety funders. There is stuff there. We're not going to have time to talk about all of it. That's why we have tomorrow's event, the integration of civilizations. This is where, again, in your package, you'll see a picture. You see a very, very good-looking guy, and then there's me. Okay? So you'll see that's the one we want to invite you all to, and please invite your colleagues. Have them come out. Whatever, just come out even for the first part to get a real understanding of the Canadian Muslim reality. Some of you have questions. Why? You're also asking, what are you going to do about it? You're also asking, is it an issue with Islam or Muslims? The answer is no. Islam is not the problem. Muslims are not the problem. The problem is the problem. And the problem is criminal radicalization. Our next speaker is a man who knows very well what it means when society turns to a specific religion or a specific race or a specific culture or a specific sexual orientation and they treat them without any dignity. Our next speaker knows the value of human rights. Our next speaker has fought the fight. He's come out and said all humans deserve to live in dignity. That true Canadians reject hate in all of its forms. We may hate an action because we disagree with something, fine. But to hate a person, that is not Canadian. So I would like to welcome, and I really hope he's here because I can't see him. He's been here all morning. All the way from Ottawa, Executive Director of the National Council of Canadian Muslims. You missed it. I'm sorry, Ihsaan. I'm sorry. I had it. It was there, and you missed it now. Ihsaan Gardee, everyone.
Somebody's iPad is up here. All right, I'll just move it over. All right. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa salatu wa salam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man taba'a sunnatihi ila yawmiddin. Assalamu alaikum, peace and blessings of God be upon each and every one of you. As the kind moderator Mahdi Qasqas has said, my name is Ihsaan Gardee, and I serve, I serve as the Executive Director of NCCM, or the National Council of Canadian Muslims, formerly known as CARCAN. We're based in Ottawa, and I apologize that I did not bring enough, apparently, of the abundant hot air that we have there here. I was told that I have about 10 minutes to speak about this topic from the perspective of NCCM and our work as a national advocacy organization. Is now five. Okay. And coming at the end of the day, it's kind of tough because sitting in the audience, I've been listening to so many people say so many great things and just nodding my head and looking at my speech saying, okay, check, check, check. What can I really add? And then thinking to myself, wow, 5 minutes. My wife would tell you that's probably as long as it takes for me to clear my throat. Before beginning again, I'd like to express my thanks as well to the organizers, Mahdi Qasqas, Dina Saeed, and the rest of the volunteers who helped make this conference possible. And I'd like to thank you all for taking your time out of your schedules to be here today. And I'm also honored to share the stage with all of the speakers, including Mrs. Christianne Boudreau, for her incredible example of courage in the face of tragedy and adversity and that of her family. My thoughts and prayers and those of everyone here are with you and your family. So, just by show of hands, how many people here have heard of NCCM? Just so I have an idea. Okay, that's better than I was expecting, and I'm glad about that. So as I said, I'll just briefly explain so people have a sense of why where I'm coming from, a little bit about our organization. We're primarily a human rights, civil liberties organization, okay? We're not a religious organization in the sense that we don't issue religious edicts and so on and so forth. We are informed by Islamic principles of mercy, justice, and compassion, but we are a human rights and civil liberties organization first and foremost. And that's the core area of our work. So we worked on high-profile cases of Canadians that you've heard about, Canadians who have been detained sent overseas and tortured and brought back, like Meher Arar, Canadians who are still abroad and being held, like Hussein Jalil in China and Bashir Makhtal in Ethiopia, but that's the high-profile work. The day-to-day work that we do as an organization is cases of discrimination and harassment targeting Canadian Muslims. And supporting that primary core area of our work, we work in 3 other areas. And that would be public advocacy, so we appear before parliamentary committees and speak about legislation that's going to be proposed that could impact the Muslim community as well as other minorities like anti-terrorism legislation or the Charter of Values in Quebec. And we also do education and outreach, which is where I'm hoping our organization can help and assist with the whole idea of youth empowerment that's being discussed today. We provide seminars, know your rights and responsibilities seminars for young people, media engagement seminars, teaching them about how the media works, how to challenge stereotypes, myths, and misperceptions. And we provide guides as well, guides to Islamic religious practices for educators, employers, healthcare providers, journalists, and we're hoping to expand that that library of publications. And lastly, as I said, media engagement. I was a little bit late because I was actually out in the hallway doing a media interview, so I apologize. I apologize for that. And so we get called on to speak about the perception of the mainstream within the Muslim community on issues that affect or are related to Muslims and Islam within a Canadian context. And I want to be very clear about that. Generally speaking, we don't speak to issues outside of Canada unless there's a Canadian connection. And here there's a very clear Canadian connection. We have young Canadians who have been affected by this and their families. So I'm very glad that the organizing group here in Calgary, Muslim community leaders and youth for the summit, along with social activists, law enforcement, and government officials, are working together to tackle this issue of criminal radicalization. It's an important step in the search for formulating effective intervention and prevention strategies. At the same time, more can and does need to be done. And given the complexity of the nature of this phenomenon of criminal radicalization, there's likely not going to be any single magic potion solution as to how we can best tackle it together. One of the most fundamental findings in terrorism research to date, and as an aside, more can and does need to be done in this area as well, what we see reflected, and again, what we also see reflected in the high-profile cases that have come to light so far, is there does not seem to be a single factor that can be pointed to as a catalyst for someone moving from being a positive, contributing member of society to somebody who espouses and supports violent and criminal extremism. Individuals who have become criminally radicalized come from a variety of ethnic, cultural, religious, and socioeconomic backgrounds. There's a very complex set of psychological, and I'm glad that Mahdi brought up the psychological aspect, social, group dynamics, political, structural, including the influence of technology, and other opportunistic factors that play a role in the trajectories of would-be violent extremists. Other factors can also play a role: previous mental instability, drug use, and as I mentioned again, the internet. I'll come back to that a little later. In terms of the psychological part, as a US study, Why Youth Join Al-Qaeda from the United States Institute of Peace states, there are various factors that can play a role in making someone more vulnerable to the allure of violent extremism, including the need to define oneself through a search for self-definition that can manifest in seeking adventure, thrill, identity, or status. Complicating this is the finding that by researchers that those who are criminally radicalized tend not to fit solely into one of those single categories, and they may be seeking more than just one of those routes to self-definition. This first step for a made-in-Canada solution, as others have said here today, is to listen, and to listen actively to the concerns and the challenges faced by Muslim community leaders, service providers, and families. After that, and only after that, will we be in a better position to design programs and community supports to specifically address those concerns. Without this phase, programs designed to engage Muslim youth at risk, using methodologies similar to addressing other challenges, are going to be encountering difficulties, as those kind of programs will tend to attract youth and young individuals, young men and women who are already engaged and who are not the intended target audience of those individuals who may be isolated or self-isolating and marginalized. As the researchers from the Canadian Network for Research on Terrorism, Security and Society, or TSAS as it's known, have written, it's important to recognize that the very nature of violent extremism and terrorism is that it is a phenomenon as a socially stigmatized and illegal activity, and thus it necessitates secrecy. Would-be terrorists and violent extremists will likely be coached to go to extreme lengths to maintain anonymity and to avoid detection, and will likely not be found operating in an open and obvious manner. This makes the job of challenging criminal radicalization even more difficult, as, in other words, those who view violence as the only acceptable solution in their worldview generally tend not to announce these views in public forums for fear of rightful censure that would follow from the mainstream. Words matter, and this is the crux of my talk today. I think it's important that we recognize that words matter, and we need to make a distinction between radicalization and criminal radicalization. Radical views have historically been responsible for some of the most positive social changes and movements we've seen, including things like protests against the Vietnam War, making the differentiation between radical environmentalism and criminal radical environmentalism. Therefore, this distinction is one that we need to keep in mind when addressing this issue. As pointed out by the British think tank Demos in their study, The Edge of Violence, some of the most effective allies that we can have in battling the cut and paste approach to ideology, to religious ideology, employed by violent extremists are those individuals who devoutly practice their faith with a high degree of knowledge. They can and have helped to shatter the veneer of religiosity promoted by violent extremists. These findings also confirm results from another US study called, I mentioned that one already, the previous study by the United States Institute of Peace, in which they said that Americans who join extremist groups do not become terrorists because they are Muslim. In fact, they are vulnerable to misinterpretations of religious doctrine because they have an inadequate understanding of the faith. Another consideration, as I mentioned earlier, and as others have spoken about as well, is the role of the internet. And while it shouldn't be overplayed as the cause of terrorism, its role as a facilitator at key points in the trajectories of terrorists cannot be denied either. Terrorists are increasingly using the internet to advance their goals and purposes and for propaganda purposes, allowing them to form networks much beyond their capabilities in earlier years. The internet offers easy access, little or no regulation, censorship, or other forms of control. There's a potential huge audiences around the world. There's anonymity of communication, fast flow of information, interactivity, an inexpensive method to have their message out there, a multimedia environment, and the ability to help potentially impact coverage in traditional mass media as well. We sometimes refer to this phenomenon as the Sheikh Google phenomenon, where those seeking religious guidance on how to interpret the teachings of their faith in regards to grievances they may hold, go online in search of answers from those whose qualifications, backgrounds, and agendas are unknown and unverified. This is why it's important that we address the topic of tackling terminology. NCCM has found that the national public security discourse in the media, politics, and public safety tends to erroneously conflate terrorism with the faith of Islam. This only serves to confuse Canadians about the nature of security in Canada, to embolden already prejudicial elements in our society, and feed the extreme narrative being espoused by terror groups such as Al-Qaeda and ISIS about the inevitable conflict between the Muslims on one side and the West on the other. There's a study by the RCMP called Words Make Worlds around this topic of terminology and its importance both in accurately identifying and describing the phenomenon of criminal radicalization, but also in avoiding using the broad brush to smear entire communities, the vast majority of whom, I think you'll agree, consider and reject the ideology of violence espoused by terrorists and would-be terrorists. To paraphrase another writer on this topic, as the wider community watches this dangerous phenomenon develop, it is significant that the question being asked again is of Canadian, whether it's Canadian, British, or American Muslims, is not simply what can be done about extremism in your community, but how do we tackle these challenges together? Otherwise, this question pushes over 1 million Canadian Muslims in this country outside of the mainstream society, causing further fissures and reinforcing those stereotypes and myths. Words matter. They create a frame of reference through which we view this problem. For those young men whose inner confusion, drug addiction, mental health issues, or yes, even extremist grooming makes them want to join some terrorist, one of the biggest recruiting lines that those terrorists have is, "The West vilifies you and your community." Added to this, there is the devastating impact of incorrectly labeling somebody as a terrorist and what that can have on them and their livelihood and lives, as exemplified in the case of Meher Arar. There will always be those who say where there's smoke, there's fire for those who are deemed innocent. As Justice O'Connor, Dennis O'Connor said in his report into the Meher Arar inquiry, and I'm paraphrasing here, but labels, even incorrect ones, have a tendency to stick. And being falsely accused of terrorism is probably one of the most serious accusations that you can level, and loaded accusations that you can level against somebody. The only comparable accusation that I can think of is being called a pedophile. In terms of the role that NCCM and other local and national organizations can do, I foresee it as assisting in the work of education and outreach through the seminars I mentioned earlier, and also to helping those young people to communicate their grievances in a way that is effective and in a way that is positive and proactive. In changing the public narrative through media engagement, going through the legal system, as well as civic and political engagement to make their voices heard. NCCM can and will coordinate with others in this effort and in this field, and we are here today to say that we're so happy and honored that you invited us. We support this initiative, and if we can be of assistance, we will. This is something that is an issue that will require short and medium and long-term strategy. In the short term, we'll have to look at things like how do we identify the factors that put people at risk, and then how do we move from there to helping to guide youth in the right direction. And lastly, how do we, well, at the same time, they can even be going forward, how do we work to de-glamorize, demystify, and deconstruct the false narratives and dichotomies promoted by religious extremists to justify their actions? And with that, I close and thank you again for your attention. And if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to talk to you.
So you throw my iPad while you're at it. See, that's the Ontario we don't. No, just joking. All right. I always have to bust on Ontario, Toronto, not Ottawa, sorry. Mr. McIntosh, I apologize, right? But I would like to thank you guys for coming out, Renee and Mr. McIntosh from Public Safety. I really appreciate you guys coming here. And you speak of human rights. Did you guys know that 2 young Muslim boys were kicked out of their school for praying? I'm not saying like they stood up in front of the cafeteria and say, I want to pray right here. I'm not saying it was a Friday prayer. They just tried to hide and pray. And the big bad school came down on them, saying, you're out. They kicked them out. Now you might think you're just making this up, or this can't possibly happen in a city like Calgary, with great people like yourselves, with great partnerships, with great dedication to human rights. But it did. And the ruling will come out soon. And I don't know how much I can speak about it, but I would like to thank Jim Foster from the Human Rights Commission, lawyer, thank you very much. I would like to thank Cam Stewart from the Human Rights Commission as well. Thank you both so much, because there is a lot that happened over the last several years. Cam used to be with the CPS, then he moved up in the world. No, sorry guys, sorry, I'm just playing. But our next speaker is one who has personally motivated me to take the next step, to go above and beyond. He is a pleasure to always listen to. And I get that you're hungry. Food is here. Wow. My old crew just takes food and leaves? Are you kidding me? I just called them all out. All right. Here's what we're going to do, though. Dr. Liepert, if you're okay, can they grab their food, put it in front of them, or you're okay with that? Okay. See, because what he has to say, I know you're going to be distracted, but what he has to say is so fundamental and essential to everything that we're doing. So, we're going to stop here. You're going to grab lunch, come sit down, hopefully. I can't tell you what to do, but we do have people with guns. And ideally, sit down, and then we're going to close off our event with Dr. Liepert's speech, a brief address by Superintendent, sorry, there's me again, I apologize. George. No, George, I know the name, what's the title? Chief Superintendent, George Stephenson, to just kind of reaffirm RCMP's role in this, and then we're going to call it a day. I will have the comedy Muslim tour after this. If you're interested, it's a brief one, but I do tell you 3 lies, and I expect you to know what they are. Fair enough? So why don't we take a break, grab some lunch, enjoy, network, get to know each other, and then we'll come back and wrap up our event. Fair enough? Thank you.
Take off if you want. You don't have to wear your uniform. You can just say, I'm just telling you.
Jerusalem. So this is beef, and that's chicken.
No, he's Canadian.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Americans only.
Okay, so please, Dr. Liepert, if I can have you come to the stage while I introduce you to your face. Again, I want to introduce you to one of my personal mentors, somebody who really embodies both the private sector, the public sector, and the third sector, civic engagement. He's worked in all these areas. He's wrote a book on Muslim, Christian, and Jew, finding a path to peace our faiths can share. His op-eds get published, even though a lot of people say, well, he's telling the truth, we shouldn't. But they do anyway, right? And he's a man that I think is so important for us to listen to that we actually had lunch before his speech. So please welcome Dr. David Liepert.
And I'm going to make it very short, actually, because mostly I just want to thank all of you for being part of this. It's just helping organize, helping put this together is its own reward. This is exciting. This is an opportunity for our community, our Canadian community, to actually have a impact that could be felt around the world because of Canada, because of our collective nature, and because of who we are. Sorry, I'm holding it too low. You can hear me better now? Mahdi, thank you. Imam Fayaz, thank you. Elders, thank you. Guests, thank you. Thank you for being part of all of this. You may wonder what a business association has to do with radicalization and why this was one of the things that we kind of took on. But it's because Muhammad, peace be upon him, was not a politician. He was a businessman. And so his businessman nature infused everything that he did, and understanding that really affects the interpretation. One of the big issues, one of the really big issues that we're dealing with in the criminal radicalization of Muslim youth is the long history of political manipulation of Islam. And that history goes back over 1,000 years. It was never meant to be a political tool. It was meant to be a tool to a better world. Muhammad, peace be upon him, as a businessman, he found that his Islam, his servanthood, and his stewardship infused his business practice. And so it was actually his Islam that gave his endeavors their meaning. And that's the inspiration that we have in the Islamic chamber. And that's the inspiration that infuses our approach to things of this sort. Because our work and our industry, it promotes a better world, development, peace and justice for all. Trade and commerce promote diversity. Imam Fayaz gave a beautiful khutbah at the beginning of this about the role of diversity in Islam, and it's not something you hear very often, but diversity is essential to the sort of relationships that we're supposed to have. Business relationships, they promote ongoing honesty, because if you're going to be working with someone, you want to treat them well, because what goes around comes around. And then just the fact that we are stewards. We are shared stewards and servants in this world that God gave us. And that perspective, rather than being affected by politics, actually affected early Muslim politics. Like the rules of jihad, for instance. Islamic jihad, you put the word Islamic in front of it, it becomes frightening in the world today. But actual Islamic jihad, the rules were you couldn't hurt a civilian, but you couldn't damage property. You couldn't muddy streams. You couldn't damage trees. If you affected a person's livelihood, you owed that person. And the fact that the radicalized, the criminally radicalized youth don't know that really speaks to their ignorance. And one of the most important things that imams like Sheikh Fayaz and that Sheikh Mahdi, who hates the term, bring to this is that our youth, as they grow in that realization, they actually know enough to run away from people who tell them otherwise. And so the actual understanding of Islam helps prevent them from being taken by this siren call out of their ignorance. It's also the better path for all of us. I had an opportunity to interview John Kay, who's the comments editor of the National Post. And we were talking about ways to deal with really knotty, weighty issues like even the Israel-Palestine conflict. And he said a really, really important thing, which always bears repeating. If you give people something to live for, then they don't only feel that they have something to die for or to kill for. And having a world with something to live for is the world that the Muslims actually created. Muhammad, peace be upon him, he actually took his life of oppression and conflict and the revelations of the Quran and their demands for, Imam Fayaz was talking about li ta'arafu, to know the other, to celebrate the other. The word to know, li ta'arafu, is the big no that actually requires an ongoing constructive relationship. And the Quran tells us that God made us different so that we would be forced into having ongoing constructive relationships with the other. And so he took those things and he created this incredible document called the Charter of Medina. And the Charter of Medina actually confirmed rights and freedoms for different religious and ethnic groups and shared responsibilities for different religious and ethnic groups, believers, non-believers. It's like the Charter of Medina is a document so much like the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms that Muslims who are aware of that history and that all-important understanding of why we are God's servants and God's stewards, it actually makes us realize that Canada is honestly the most Islamic country on the earth. Alhamdulillah. Praise God for that. Because it means we can take our shared Muslim Canadian heritage and promote the best of all of our worlds. and, God willing, export Canadian multiculturalism and export Canadian rights and freedoms and care and peace and justice and all of the incredible things that we have here that we don't have to feel guilty about, that unfortunately can be manipulated into survivor guilt and draw wonderful young men like Damian into a place that they should never have gone. And we, as a community, as a Canadian community, as a Canadian Muslim community, as a community of all of us, can work together to create an opportunity for men like Damian to have a better way, to find a world where peace is shared and justice is for everyone. And Mahdi, you are our inspiration in this, and it's just, thank you. Like, I know you're the last speaker, so I get to introduce you. I've known Mahdi. Naja called me up one day and he said, there's this young kid, and we're thinking we should hire him to do something with our youth because he's pretty smart. Would you talk to him? And so Mahdi and I went out for coffee. And out of that conversation came probably the best decision that our council ever made, which was to empower you. And you are now working to empower Lama and Dina and Rahmatullah and all of the people who are going to make a difference. And it's that empowerment that will make this a better world for everyone. Thank God for you, Mahdi. And now get up here and close us off.
Well, thank you everybody for coming. I would like to invite a speaker who wasn't scheduled to speak, but it's so important for him to address this audience. And then I promise I'm going to close. Fair enough? So please join me in welcoming Chief Superintendent Stephenson from the RCMP.
Amongst all of the notes that are here, I have my notes that I wrote just from today. So having an opportunity, and thank you very much, even though unplanned, to speak here briefly, I'm going to take a couple of minutes just to firstly bring greetings from the commanding officer of the RCMP in Alberta, Marianne Ryan, and Assistant Commissioner Marlon DeGrand. My role in the RCMP is I oversee the National Security Program for the province of Alberta. I work out of Edmonton, but spend a great deal of time here in Calgary. Who was affected by radicalism? What do we know about it? Who are our partners? What's our response? And how are we going to assess how well we're doing? I just laid out a model that the RCMP uses, and we look forward to, in the next coming months and perhaps years, being a significant part of the work that will take place in Calgary. Who is affected? Individuals, families, friends, agencies, community leaders, law enforcement, all levels of government, educational institutions, just to name a few. What do we know? The RCMP conducts risk assessments on individuals who come to our attention. We take the threat of radicalism very seriously. What's happening today is that we've come together to develop a strategy to address and to put a plan in place to assist the community about tomorrow and going forward in order to address radicalization and to prevent criminal radicalization. The RCMP is a significant partner, and I want to share with you a number of strategies that are taking place as we speak. Countering violent extremism training is taking place in Ottawa. A number of police agencies from across Canada and with the RCMP are taking that course. 3 members of the Calgary Police Service are taking that course. Here in Calgary at the RCMP headquarters in the city of Calgary, we have the National INSET team, National Security Enforcement team, working around the clock at times over the last year, literally around the clock. We have members of the Calgary Police Service who are members of that team, who work closely and daily with the RCMP. Here today are 2 members of our outreach team. If I can get you to stand up, Naveed, I'll get you to stand up, Nadar. Both of these highly trained officers here work the area of INSET investigations in Alberta. And firstly, thank you very much for all your efforts, and look forward to working with you in the future as we go forward with this group here. Thank you. What do they do? These are boots on the street, as they call it in policing. Your partners at your office are working diligently in conjunction with the RCMP and a national program and our domestic partners in Canada and internationally. I want to share that message with you on this issue. We know that there is many proactive steps that are taking place, but I believe at the end of the day, it's going to be the collective effort, and from my 32 years of experience in the RCMP, it's going to be the collective effort of this group here, as we are here today, who will make the biggest difference. We will work around the clock for you. We do work around the clock for you. But we need your assistance, and we are there to give you and make available to you all the resources that the RCMP has in relation to radicalization in this community and in the province. What is the assessment part? We're not there yet. It's ongoing. We will remain vigilant. We must remain vigilant. I learned after a couple of weeks on the job now that we have a number, it's called our National Security Information Network. And I spoke to a number of people about that today. So what this has kickstarted for me and our folks here and our members of the RCMP and our partnership with you is to develop a process that is relevant and practical in response to what's taking place here in Calgary. That means we can use it. So thank you for a few minutes. And I want to share that information with you. I've met some friends here, and I made a number of new friends here today. And that is going to continue. And it will take the sum of the whole parts to come up with a strategy that you will be happy with. And when I say happy with, I use that word loosely, that makes sense to you, and that you'll say, yes, this is making a difference. It is making a difference. So I don't have a card for everybody, but I can tell you that if you have any information on anyone at any time, please phone the RCMP in relation to radicalization. I am actually moved by what I would call the overall sense here of urgency, which is so important. That has moved me and has brought a great deal of comfort that I know that I'm going to be working with a significant amount of experts in their fields here today. And I look forward to that, and I look forward to hearing more from in the future. So thank you very much.
So here we go, the end. If you know anybody who's criminally radicalized or somebody recruiting, I'm gonna say call me. All right, I'll de-radicalize them myself. And I think, working together we can develop, I was just joking about that last one, but you could call me, my number's over there. Working together we can develop proper intervention strategies that are based on clear evidence, that are based on things that work, and we can evaluate, and we can do so much more together. We can develop the assessment tools, the tests, and the strategies that let us know who is low, medium, high risk of criminal radicalization. At what stage are they in? Because if I pick up the phone and be like, hey, there's a guy in here with a gun in the mosque, would you go investigate? Of course not. Your staff are experts in what they do, but the idea is to minimize the mistakes made and to increase the productivity of the work that we're doing. I want to invite you again all tomorrow. I'm not going to go through the whole logic model and the crime prevention model today because it is too late. And I think the key of this event is to recognize that it is possible. We can own it, and we will continue to own it. And next year when we invite you, I'll have a really nice thing to say about you because we'll develop the partnership. And I would like everyone here to recognize that this is why we're here, to bring people together. And we want to continue to bring people like yourselves together and make it greater. So I'd like to end by giving thanks to everybody except for whoever said, no, just joking. I'm gonna use my theater voice, all right? Yeah, so I'd like to thank people that I've already thanked, but also we have, the organizations, Calgary Police Services, RCMP, Calgary Bridge Foundation for Youth, CBE, we have Mr. Taj Morali, good friend, he's here representing CBE, the US Consul, we have National Crime Prevention Center, we have the government officials. Of course, we don't thank ourselves, but I'll let you know who ourselves are. We're the Muslim Council of Calgary, Institute of Muslim Youth Development, Calgary Islamic Chamber Institute, Think for Actions, the Muslim Students Association, and of course, 3 own Muslim Youth and Family Services. Also Youth Criminal Defense Office. Where's Diana? There she is. How are you? Good. Excellent. And anybody else who I have not thanked, I apologize. I do thank you from the bottom of my heart. Media, thank you for being such good sports about this. I know I crack a lot of jokes. I hope you're not offended. You're not, are you? You're like, oh, we weren't even listening. We were here for Chris. We were only here for Chris. Right? So, and thank you, of course, Chris, for being here with us as part of our family. Enjoy the rest of the day, everybody, and don't forget to own it. Can I get a show of hands? Who's interested in the tour? Anybody want to take the tour? Mosque tour? The mosque tour?